everybody, Joel Carlson here with Faces of Minnesota. Today my guest is Jamie Yuccas of WCCO Television, and so we're happy to have her as a guest and ask her her first question. Jamie, tell us what drew you to covering the news and also to journalism?
It's actually a question I get asked a lot, and the funny thing is when I was a little girl I wanted to be a detective. I always was asking questions, I wanted to know the answers to things, I was very inquisitive to the point that I drove my mother absolutely crazy. But then I started doing things. I got a tape recorder as a gift from my grandfather, and so I would go around and I actually interviewed all of my relatives, and I found it really interesting listening to their stories and hearing what they had to say. Then as I got a little bit older, I ended up going ahead and I started my own newspaper with my cousins at the cabin called the Loon Lagoon, and I sent them all out as reporters to gather information about like the picnics and parties that were coming up at the cabin, and they'd come back to me and I'd type it up on a typewriter we had at the cabin, and then later a word processor, and so we had the Loon Lagoon for a while. And I really just got interested in telling people stories. I love meeting new people. I always thought I would write for a newspaper. I went to the University of Minnesota and wrote for the Minnesota Daily. And while I was there, I had a professor that said you should look at all mediums. And so I actually took an internship here at WCCO. And that was fantastic. I ended up falling in love with putting pictures to words. And that's kind of how I got into television journalism. But it really started as just a fascination of everything and asking questions about anything and everything and driving my mother crazy.
Good story. Now, after being here at WCCO, you went to two other markets. You went to Rochester, Minnesota, which is obviously a smaller market than Minneapolis here. How did that go for you? What was it like, your experience of, covering maybe more rural stories and stuff?
I actually really enjoyed covering Rochester. I made 3 of my best girlfriends on the planet in that smaller town, which, because there wasn't a lot of people there our age, as a matter of fact, there's some nurses and different things at Mayo Clinic, but it was primarily the people that I worked with were the friends that I had, and we had a blast. We would cover everything from farm issues to, there was a number of traffic accidents actually in Rochester, some of the highway issues that were there, winter storms, obviously those happen, severe weather, that kind of thing. And really what I loved about the small market is that you got to learn a little bit of everything, because there isn't a ton going on all the time. You get to learn city government and talking and sourcing police officers and firefighters and those types of things. And you really learn how to gather sources and be able to talk to people, and you learn about so many different things in that small town that you may not necessarily have learned in college. So it's kind of a nice area to kind of continue the education, I would say, and also meet some great people along the way. So Candace, Nikki, and Asha, I love you guys, and I was so glad that I started in Rochester.
Great. Now, after Rochester, you went on to Fort Myers, Florida, which is obviously not the Midwest at all.
Nope. Except they call it Minnesota South. I will say that. They call Fort Myers Minnesota South because so many people vacation there.
Okay, I can see that. Now, how would you say the news is covered in Florida as opposed to their focus and the different types of stories that they have?
I get asked that a lot, and Florida is a very interesting place to live, and it's a very interesting place as a news person to cover. Fort Myers, there is a Midwestern influence in the sense that the Twins have spring training, so I never felt that far away from home in the wintertime. But the people that live in Florida, it's a very transitional market. There's a lot of people that come to Florida and then leave, or they come for work and then they leave. At the time that I was there, the housing boom happened and the collapse happened. So you saw a lot of transition in the economy and the housing market. Fort Myers, Naples was actually hit just as bad as places like Las Vegas, Nevada, and places in California. So that was a story, obviously, we covered a lot, the economy. Besides that, you cover hurricanes. When I was there, I think I covered 2 tropical storms and 3 hurricanes while I was there.
Were you ever the person outside standing in the rain?
I was the person outside standing in the rain with a palm frond or something blowing by me in water. The one scary part is you have to remember when you're standing in that water that there can be alligators or snakes. So I much prefer being in Minnesota where you don't have to worry about something eating you when you're standing in that water. The other thing about Florida that's a little bit different is I think, there's that Midwest, Minnesota nice mentality, and I think people like their news in a smart, nice way. It's presented in a clean way, and it's also smart news, and you're covering topics that range a number of different issues, whereas in Florida, it is a lot of blood and guts, and if you ever watch CSI Miami, it's a lot of those kinds of crimes. And so it was very different. You felt like you were running to a lot of different breaking news scenes. There were a number of shootings, unfortunately, and murders and those kind of things. And so it's
a little more intense.
It's a little bit more intense. There's lots of that kind of stuff that's happening there, where you're not getting so in depth or maybe telling the most pleasant story all the time. So I prefer being here over some of the stories that I covered there. But again, great learning market, and really helps me with breaking news and those kinds of things. I feel like I have a skill set that I wouldn't have had I not worked in Florida.